welcome to the last session of the conference. I hope this is going to be interesting, at least it turned out to be interesting in San Francisco. But it's totally up to you guys. So we have Ocean Panel over there in the front, and I can struggle these guys if you ask nicely. So this is how it's going to be working. We have a mic in the front, and I hope that you guys have really good questions. And if you have a question, please come in the front and ask on the mic. So whoever is over here gets the priority. I have some questions over here as well, so we can fill in with those, but I would expect you guys to have those questions and kind of try to somehow squeeze in more performance out of the compiler. So let's start, and then while you are thinking your questions and coming here, we'll have a warm-up question. And let's start with something light, right? Like Dart. I think Dart is good. So, no. So let's start with Dart first. So, in 2 years, what's the kind of relationship between Dart and GWT?
So I probably can cover this. So the story between, let's say, JavaScript, GWT, and Dart has always been, if you like JavaScript, you're going to write JavaScript because you're good in it, you feel comfortable, it's working fine for you, why should you be switching to GWT? If you do like Java, well, there's a good compiler that compiles the JavaScript and that your programs run there anyway. And that's the same for Dart. If you do like Dart and you think it's a great idea, well, use it. We're not going to tell you that Java is the better language, please stick with us. If you think GWT is good, there's no reason to not use it. So let's say Dart kicks really off and is really successful in 2 years, and they get their VM into Chrome. And it turns out to actually be faster than V8. Then we should actually be thinking about a way to actually give you guys that still work in Java a good way of running the programs on top of that as well. So we could be thinking of just building a GWT Java to Dart transpile. But right now that's just too early to do because there's no runtime for you guys right now. You could be like, I don't know, you could be translating GWT source code to Dart right now to compile it to JavaScript right now. But you kind of already have that with GWT, so it doesn't really make sense. So all good stories, and hopefully you made that clear. We're working on that. You can actually choose to use anything you want to use, like with JS interop. And so if some good web component is written in Dart, you will be able to consume it with GWT, and that's fine. You want to add anything?
No, you read my mind.
Okay, let's continue with something lighter. So let's do the introductions. Let's start from here. Yeah, who are you, what are you doing, why you are here?
I am Brian Slesinsky. I'm a member of the GWT team at Google, and I was here to talk about dev mode in Super Demo.
My name is Colin Alworth. I work at Sencha on GXT. My job is in part to write code, to manage the GXT team, and then also to talk about GWT and GXT wherever I can. Stack Overflow, IRC, occasionally up in front of people in bright lights.
My name is.
I think they just
My name is Daniel Kurka from Cromwell, and I work on GWT, and I'm here to mainly talk about the compiler and all the cool interop stuff, and I guess that's all I'm good for.
I think I'm good with this one. Hi, my name is Daniel. I work for Google on the GWT team, and yeah, you probably have been like in one of my talks at least, so you know who I am.
Hi, so I'm Artur, working at Vaadin as the head of R&D there. Basically managing products in the R&D and trying to do development as much as possible, whenever possible.
Hi, my name is Christian Goudreau. I co-founded ArcBees. We specialize into the building web developer tools for GWT and Google App Engine. I'm also one of the guys that created GWT.
Hello, my name is Julien. I'm a software architect at ArcBees. I'm working with Christian. I'm a GWT contributor, and I'm working on the GSS resource, so to integrate closure style sheet in GWT.
Okay, and it seems that we can kind of wrap up this panel early as you don't have any questions, right? Anyone?
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Come on, guys, there's a mic over there.
Let's start with me. Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah, can everybody hear me? I have a question on the GWT compiler. We see nowadays that we're compiling to JavaScript. Are there any plans on taking the structure of GWT, which resembles a lot of Android, I think, in some ways? You have UI binder, it looks like the same framework. Could you compile that to a native Android?
You could probably do something like that. First of all, we already have a compiler, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, called J2 Objective-C, that compiles GWT-like code to Objective-C, native Objective-C code. And that is, has its own form of JISNY, which basically has Objective-C code inlined. So that actually turns out to be working, and it's actually their products built at it at Google, like Google Sheets. So if that's possible, it's certainly possible also to maybe have GWT generate LLVM code. And then you can use any LLVM code to take it to like NACL, native client, or to NDK on the Android. The big problem is that not the transpilation of Java into a foreign platform, it's the APIs, right? And so you have to think about how does a Java class with JISNY code in it get translated onto Android, into native Android UIs. That doesn't really work. It could work with WebView. Now, way back in 2008, I did a presentation at Google I/O called GWT Extreme. And in that presentation, I introduced a generator and linker combination for GWT called Syndroid, meaning synthesis of GWT and Android. And basically what it did is it was kind of before PhoneGap. It would allow you to write code, and you could just mark certain pieces of code that would run in Dalvik, and other pieces of code would run in the WebView, and you wouldn't have to do anything else. And actually would just arrange synchronous calls between Dalvik code and WebKit code. And so you could make a hybrid application that would run on Android application. But as far as just taking a GWT app and just magically transferring it into a native Android app, it leverages the native widgets. I don't really think that would work without human assistance. Does that answer your question?
Second question, that's maybe more for Daniel. We have mGWT, working with it myself. Are those mGWT going to merge into GWT itself?
Yeah, I tend to get this question a lot. So let me reverse that. What would you actually be gaining if I would drop the mGWT source code into GWT trunk?
Basically what I was thinking along the lines is that as we see that HTML5 becomes more and more the standard, and when you do a branded app, not when you want to use the mGWT native look and feel and stuff like that, then you would start using mGWT, I think. But if you have a branded app which should look all the same on all platforms, then it would be really handy to have at least the detection between tablet, phone, iOS and stuff like that within the standard GWT stack. That would be the support I was searching for there.
Yeah, you're basically saying we're missing a couple of things in the SDK that should actually be in the standard that are currently in mGWT. And I somewhat agree. We should have a couple of linkers that help you, let's say, target certain situations, like, I don't know, like offline support. That's actually been a presentation today, and we should like be better at this. So today, actually, everybody loads their own linkers to make something like this possible. Same goes for detecting, am I running on an iPhone? That should probably be part of GWT right now. Yeah, and I get that. When it comes to moving mGWT completely into GWT, I don't think that makes so much sense. Right now.
Okay, but that's basically what I was looking for, because...
Yes, so let's try to actually be practical about this. If you think there's something that should be in there, just file a feature request with us. And we can just just talk about it individually and actually see if it makes sense. I just want to say that because a couple of people might be interested, like moving mGWT into GWT trunk would actually tie it to GWT releases right now. And those are only going to be like every 6 months or every 8 months, depending on how we actually schedule. So, and I don't think that actually makes sense, because if there's a new iOS upgrade, you certainly need to do something to mGWT, and tying that to a GWT release just does not make sense right now.
No, clear.
Yeah.
That was it for me.
So, more questions, anyone? Only one mic. And you can actually line up behind him so we can...
Hello, my name is Dennis. My question is to Colin. A couple of years ago, I used to work with a great library of GXT. And after GXT3, GXT seems to be freezed. Like there were 6 patches released or somewhat like that. And what are the plans to develop the library?
We're still moving. We're doing a bug fix release up until we started the heavy work on 3.1. We're doing a release about every 6 to 8 weeks. So we're still moving. 3.1 has required a little more work. The theme builder that I presented did take, did take some significant time to develop several solutions that are the wrong way of solving the problem. And then once we got those out of the way, we decided to actually do the right way. Now that we've got that mostly worked out, that's what we're going to be shipping as part of 3.1. We'll be doing a 3.07 release, and then we'll be continuing on from there, planning about every 6 to 8 weeks doing bug fix releases.
And what are the main features of 3.1?
The main features of 3.1 are the theme builder. Getting that in a comprehensive look at all widgets, how do we retheme every widget in the library? That is the big thing, because it is a big thing.
But you did mention that there's a 4.0 being planned.
There's a 4.0 plan for the summer, yes. And 4.0 is going to cover touch things. I covered that a little bit in the keynote this morning. How do we get touch events? How do we get all the various widgets to work correctly in touch situations? Cases like that.
Okay, thank you. We'll be waiting.
So, question to the audience. Who need to support IE8 next year in your applications? Not too many, actually. I'm optimistic. Who needs to support IE9? Most of the guys. And question to the panel goes, when can we drop support for these 2 browsers and why should we do it? Let's start from the left this time. Yeah.
I think that if we want to innovate in Grid, we have to drop the support to Internet Explorer 8, and if people want to continue to build application with Internet Explorer 8, you have to use a version of Grid. That's my main reason that we want to drop the support to AO8.
Well, in my case, I think I'll take a little bit the side of the guys that is using IE8 right now, because we have a lot of clients that are still in that field and that won't be likely to move. So IE7 is out of the way, I don't really care about it. IE8 though, in banks and healthcare, unfortunately it would take, even though they are moving slowly, we have some that have moved to IE9, but it's still IE9, it's not IE10. But for most of them, they're still on IE8. I would like them to move more faster, but I cannot kick their ass, unfortunately.
So what you are saying is that we should keep supporting those?
Yeah.
Okay. Artur.
Yes, we should definitely support IE8, but I should not do that work.
That's the other question. Who wants to build that?
No, actually, as long as there's a significant amount of people that are using and relying on IE8, we need to support it in some way. But what that way is not very clear to me today. I mean, the new stuff that is being built, we should not slow down the building of the new stuff just to be able to support IE8. But on the other hand, we should be very careful also not to just drop IE8 for the sake of dropping IE8. So, I mean, just going and delete everything related to IE8 just for the fun of it.
So, I'm maybe the person who actually started all this because I was pushing for this. And I'm not pushing for this just because of the sake of deleting IE8. I want to have a good story in 1 or 2 years that you can actually tell someone and just make an example here, we are better than AngularJS because of this and that, because you can do this so much better in Grid. And we actually need this because, fairly simple, if we cannot convince Google products to actually use Grid, our team is useless for Google. And that would actually kill all our engineering resources. And frankly, Google is not paying us to support IE8 because we don't care about this anymore. But we know that you do care. And it's not you that don't want to move off IE8. I don't think there's someone in the room that's that, I don't know, self-hating, that he actually says, well, I would really like to develop for IE8. So we need to find a good way of actually innovating without like putting a big metal chain on our wrist, but still not leave you guys behind. And a couple of other frameworks have actually gone down a route of just splitting up for a while. That's normally, if you're traveling in a big group, you tend to slow down. If you divide the group in people that want to travel faster and people that cannot travel for some reason right now, that might make sense. So we might, that's just an idea right now, we might up ending actually having 2 branches of GWT. One that just moves along at GWT.create and just is the new stuff. And that might just be supporting IE10+. And then we have a 2.x branch, 2.7, 2.8 that is still supported. So you guys still have a supported way of building GWT applications that still supports IE8 and 9. But you cannot use the new features we've actually have shown you. So there's a good incentive for actually getting your clients to move off IE8 and IE9, because you can tell you we can build so much better applications for you if you give us the right infrastructure to actually do it.
Question from the audience before Ray continues. Who thinks it would be a good idea to drop support for IE8 and IE9 from GUI 3? Wow. Who would hate the idea? That's surprising, actually. Great.
So maybe I could say something to change your mind. When we talked about the idea of maybe, and this is just one of the ideas we're talking about, to try to not leave you guys behind. There's many different scenarios we've come up with. Is if we do create this forked situation where GWT 3.x is for all the new browsers, and then there's this continuing series of GWT 2.6, GWT 2.7, 7.1, 8, 8.1, and so on. We would not necessarily have to totally leave all the cool features behind. For example, if there's a new super dev mode that is released in GWT 3.0 that's like amazing and everyone loves it, it might be the case that some or all of its new stuff could be backported and cherry-picked into the older release. I don't know about the incremental compilation stuff, if that might end up making it only into 3 or into like 2.7, but maybe but that's the general idea, is maybe things that are, some of the things that you heard about like interop might actually still work on the older browsers, and so but web components won't. So web components would be 3.0 only, but maybe the new JS interop, JS interface stuff would work, of course, because it's just kind of a replacement for JISNY.
Yeah, I guess I'd argue the other side of it is that I don't think splitting things up doesn't make that much sense to me. It means more having to support more than one version. I guess other people have a lot more to worry about there, but I don't know. I just think that the deferred binding system works well for having an IE8 specific version of something that basically doesn't, especially since the support is already implemented, it just seems like it shouldn't get too much in the way. I can certainly understand it, and maybe with the new features that might add something new and say that this new API doesn't work with IE8, but it seems like we should be able to have all the existing stuff, since it already does work. Maybe just shuffle things around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that might work for the user code. I think there is a problem though with like certain things, like the one part of the JS interrupt spec is the idea of actually being able to inherit from an existing native browser API. Like I could make a subclass of the window object or of the button object. And you guys are much more of an IE8 expert than I am, but if I recall correctly, one of the weird things about IE less than 10 is that the native browser objects are somewhat special in the JavaScript engine, and you actually can't modify them or subtype them. They kind of are like an alien species.
I think it depends, but yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, so there might be some that you could subtype with the JS interface, but then others wouldn't actually work. It'd be like a no-op or something.
So it's not just about deferred binding, it's also about the JavaScript runtime actually is kind of fundamentally different in IE8.
Well, as we found out in, what, RC 1 or 2, Firefox also gets grumpy about that with some errors. For my own part, I see this from a couple of different perspectives. On the one hand, we do want to keep pushing forward, especially as a widget library. We're all about things being pretty and shiny and flashy. But on the other hand, the kind of organization in Google that built this library and needs it to keep going, this framework, this compiler, sees it from a very particular perspective. But the community that GWT continues to grow on sees it from a very different perspective. And it's hard to try and reconcile these two pieces. One remark I have from the look we took yesterday morning from Ray's keynote was that GWT was originally designed to unify a lot of these pieces, to be able to paper over the gaps between all the different browsers, from the terrible issues that were in one versus another versus a third. There was no browser when we started off that was consistent with any other browser. If we get to a point where we're saying, well, we've got IE8 and 9 that are terrible in this way, and then IE10 and 11 still don't have this piece, but we can paper it over this other way, and then we've got the modern browsers that update every day and a half, then we can start to look at, are we at the same problem again? How much are we gaining by deciding where do we drop different things? I don't necessarily want to push one or the other. Like they said earlier, there have been some great proposals in the last day or so to discuss this further, to think about it further, but we do want to be careful not to get ourselves in a situation where for this feature, we have these browsers and these other browsers, for some reason we've said that's not acceptable. Would GWT have been the success it was if it said IE6 is terrible, we should just cut it off right from the start, when IE6 was already old?
So, don't you really have any questions? I mean, just look at the mic. He's sad.
It's so lonely.
Don't do that, it looks bad.
Okay, we got this.
Sorry about it.
Okay, hi, I'm Ben. I'm a software engineer at CERN. I have a question regarding UI Binder. When I use UI Binder, I constantly miss some more powerful features, like, for example, easy control flow. So if, else, and looping over collections. So one might argue that the UI Binder is intended to only produce static layout, and for more dynamic layout you have to then code it by hand or do smaller UI Binder parts. So what's your opinion on this a bit more control flow power in UI Binder? Do you think it's worth it, or it's not the task of?
I think first of all, none of the Googlers on the panel actually are probably best suited for answering this question. Probably Colin would be the person who's done the most amount of work with UI Binder recently. But just to give my own personal opinion, in template languages like this, I don't really like any control flow that's more complex than a simple loop or a conditional. That said, I do believe there's this thing called a UI renderer. I don't know if you've seen that. It was added in 2.5. So it's sort of a way to make that you can kind of call out to some code that does things like a repeater that loops around. So you can kind of build, but you can't? Oh yeah, that's for the cell renders, yes. So you effectively have to build a cell renderer to kind of like make a control flow.
And then no widgets.
Yeah.
So if you want control flow, you can't do it in UI Binder or anything.
Yeah, I told you he was the expert.
Well, unfortunately, the expert, at least in this context, says the answer is yes, you're right, that's the way it works. From our perspective at Sencha, it seems to be, from the discussions we had at the time with people building UI Binder, deliberate and by design that it doesn't have those features. We tried to get a couple of members of the team tried to get things like that, and it was pretty much said, no, we can't add new features like this because it's designed very specifically to solve this problem and solve it exactly in this way. We looked at it instead saying, okay, well, what if we made it easier to expose some of the inner workings so we could build some of our own parsers and the like? The response there was, no, we can't expose these things because we would very much like to rewrite them in the future and change them, which we said, yes, that would be nice, we'd love that. At least one major change has happened, possibly two, 2.5, 0, or 1 did go through a major overhaul of a bunch of those pieces. And we did get a patch in that changed how a few pieces worked so we could make things slightly more configurable. But yes, I think, at least from the Sencha side, the general consensus is it's a great tool, but it could be greater. And it's hard to say, how do we get into a consensus on how it would be greater?
I think most of the people, I think the conditions of when those objections were raised are no longer applied. So probably if you were to submit a few CLs, there probably would not be as much pushback today.
I could imagine that Goudreau actually would be pushing back because he kind of believes that UI binder should be replaced by a more powerful tool with a new JS interrupt stuff, a new templating language stuff. I doubt that he actually would be focusing on doing something to it, but that might actually be a good chance of improving it, because if we're not focused on it anymore, it just is a matter of, do you break Google code with this?
Yes, I was going to say.
New tool is also our thinking at Sencha, and we're open to interpretate. We're open to ideas on that, and either making it part of GWT or just another third party like GSS resource and GWT.
Yeah, I think if Goudreau is focused on Witness 2.0, that he's not going to actually care about pushing back on any improvements to make the UI binder as far as Google is concerned. So if Sencha actually has definite needs for it, and there's not a reason to deny the improvements, I don't think that there would be any objection to improvements.
I think that I would actually be responsible for reviewing that, so I guess so I guess we could actually probably talk about this and see if it makes sense. But I still would get like Goudreau's opinion on this, because he's like the actual person leading this.
Okay, thanks. Then another question. I think you mentioned it regarding the permutations of the compilation. Will they go away or will they stay? So I think you said something about having a quirks mode and a standards mode. But I think this is also linked to the way will we support IE or not.
So that's not actually linked to the way, are we going to support IE or not? Yeah, in a way, actually you're right, in a way it is. So the permutations were created to actually pave over the differences of browsers. But if you look at them lately, I've done that for history, for instance. The history implementation only differs very, very slightly. There's no code side gain. There's no code side gain anymore. So they basically all look the same if you update them. So you could ask the question, well, if I go through every impl class we have in there, and all the implementations now look the same on modern browsers, why the hell do we have a permutation system? That just makes the compiler way more bloated and puts a lot of problems in it. Why not just have one permutation like all the other compilers have? And then there's the question, how would you handle I18N? Because currently that's handled by permutations. And I think we're actually handling I18N wrong. We should handle the data and put it into a linking phase and not reuse the permutation system for this. I'm thinking the permutation system has been around for a long time and people have started using it for different things. So it's really hard to actually phase that out because we're going to break a lot of people, no matter what. And there are people that reuse the permutation system for things that you could actually achieve in a different way. And so this is going to be a long-term thing, actually thinking about how we can change that. And we kind of came into an agreement right now. What's like the first step to actually figure this out is like rewriting all the input classes, then actually looking at the difference. And then we can start collapsing those, so changing our normal hard permutations to so-called soft permutations. Those who work, that they just put an if statement in your code. And you would see a slight code size increase because of that. And would still mean the compiler is actually not doing the permutations anymore, but they're still there, you can still rewrite to them. And then we can have an educated discussion about whether we actually still want to do that or not.
There's one other piece I want to add to that, and that's looking at the use of these things. I mean, first of all, the differences in browsers, if those are going away, that definitely decreases one piece. The second one, locale or different strings we want to change back and forth. That also tends to include, again, a little bit earlier discussion, CSS files, trying to pick which one for which browser, still a user agent chain. The next big one that I would be concerned with is the case where we're looking at form factors and providing different implementations of views. And these are wildly different implementations based on which particular classes you want present. On a mobile app, you want as few widgets as possible, as little code as possible. On a tablet, you can afford to have a little more, so it's not a code size thing, but it is a wildly different implementation thing. And then on desktop, you've got less concerns, but you still want to have the smallest size possible. So we're looking at still some cases where permutations can be handy, but not necessarily essential. They could merely be different applications.
You could think about, if you look at the closure compiler, it actually compiles GSS to CSS. It doesn't have the notion of permutation. It simply is called with a variable. Let's say define Firefox 2, and then it compiles that CSS file for that specific browser. So you could actually change that notion of having 3 form factors here and different implementations for something. So I'm just setting this as a configuration property. And that would remove all the rebinding from the compiler, would make it much easier to maintain. But that's just thinking right now. We're not actually there to make an educated decision here.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that we're thinking a bit about is perhaps like doing if statements or that sort of thing based on the specific browser might not be the best way to go. Maybe we should have something more like some kind of capability system so that you can say, well, instead of if some particular browser, you could say, for example, if let's say WebGL is available or particular features like that, that would at least allow us to start migrating code away from having hard-coded browser strings in it, and so that way, when a new browser is released, we can then update the capability system, and based on that, get support right away for it.
Yeah, that's like a major thing. So today, having a new browser always requires us to do work, and that's kind of a shame. What if we're just going to have an if statement that says, well, if you do have, let's for instance, object.keys, and if just polyfills that what all the other Java framework are doing if it's not there, and otherwise it just uses the function that's there. This would mean that a new browser wouldn't require any work from us, any new GWT version. That would leave you in a better place, and that's the kind of thinking we're doing right now.
Okay, thanks. Maybe back to the super dev mode. For one, was it planned to be actually replacing the dev mode?
There's no particular plan.
But there's more or less a deadline.
Yeah, so there's a deadline for the Chrome plugin.
Yes.
There's no particular deadline for IE, for example. The question is really going to be with the new features like the new JS interop, whether it's supporting that might be a problem. So I guess, yeah, I don't know. I would like to, part of the reason I came and gave you a talk is to get people started, let them know that there's a problem, but yeah, there's no particular date when we're going to remove planned quite yet.
So let's ask the audience. What do you think, how many of you are using neither super demo or dev mode in your development on a daily basis? So it seems just a couple of you. Who's using dev mode on daily basis when they are developing? Okay. How about super dev mode?
So we've got a lot of work to do here.
Yeah. So why is that? What would you like to have from super dev mode in order to be able to switch?
So debugging, you got that, but you mean maybe debugging an IDE?
And with debugging, with all the capabilities that are in debugging of that base, or as
many as feasible. So you're saying you want to inspect a variable and see that whole tree. So that's a technical problem. Source maps can map any code line to a Java token, that works, but they don't give you information on, let's say, the parameters that are in a function. So we cannot do certain, I think Ray's probably better to actually answer this.
Yeah, we're looking at extending. I hope it's not spilling out everywhere. We're looking at somehow extending the runtime reflection. Source maps provide a sort of runtime reflection, meaning that you can query for a given line of JavaScript code what is the original Java it came from. But what you don't get is for a given sort of JavaScript object from a heap, what are the fields on that thing? What were they originally named? Because it's not a line number, you're just kind of looking at an object. So it's got a memory location, but not an actual position in the JavaScript source. So the source map doesn't really apply to it. So I've been talking with Brian, we've been trying to figure out an extension to the source map format that will allow the GWT compiler to actually generate in debug mode additional information so that when you go to inspect the object, the IDE or Chrome will be able to actually figure out what the original names of the fields were. So that's one thing. And that goes also for functions. So if you're looking at the function a local variable, like a var statement in a JavaScript function, you'll know by inspecting the stack like what that variable really is, because it's basically one of the locals that came from that Java function somewhere. But it's doable. We just have to come up with a standards-based specification, because we do this, and we want to get significant uptake into it, like Eclipse and other things. We have to do it so that it also would support like Closure Compiler and Dart and CoffeeScript and those guys. So we try to, when we do extend source maps, we try to not make it quit specific. We try to make it work for everybody.
So there's one thing I actually want to add. So if you guys sit here and say, well, I actually do like dev mode a lot, why are you changing this? So we don't have a choice about this. And I hope that's actually clear right now. But we have lots and lots of Googlers writing GWT code every day, which kind of have the same dilemma right now. They actually like dev mode and being able to debug in Eclipse or IntelliJ. So we need, this is one that our internal customers care about a lot. They want us to make this as good as possible. And the good news is we're not alone in this. We have the Dart team, we have the Closure people, they have the same problems going on. So I think this is something we're going to focus on, and we're going to make this better. We don't know how far we can actually push this right now, but we're going to try. Okay?
So would it be good enough for you, I mean, asking from you, that if dev mode would kind of keep working only in old browsers, let's say Firefox ESR,
or IE8, given the number of minutes.
And then we drop support for IE.
Most of the issues are cross browsers. So it's relevant for the classic dev mode and for super dev mode. If we solve the problem for one browser, you fix 90% of our problems. You have to understand it. So you don't, if you're talking about super dev mode, you don't have to comply with all the browsers. If you fix it, for example, in Chrome, which is maybe easier, then you fix 90% of our problems.
So we just need debug.
Then we debug
Yes.
inside.
Well, one of the great things. Yes. I think one of the good things about super dev mode is that if we do make it work, it actually will work for every browser for the most part. Even though the older browsers don't necessarily have source maps, there are still some things we could potentially do. I haven't really talked with Brian about this, but a long time ago, like talking with the Atlanta people, we had some ideas for how to do some stuff on IE. And by the way, there is somebody who has implemented a version of dev mode in JavaScript. So in the audience, there he is over there.
Okay.
So he's actually implemented a regular version of dev mode that's pluginless. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I can. So yeah, it was just for fun. I wanted to see, can this be done?
So this is how you have fun at Vaadin.
Yeah, but basically I got it kind of working. Some problems is that it's leaking memory because the browser doesn't tell me when the objects are not used anymore. It's very, very slow because the only way of doing synchronous communication that I have found out that is really usable is to use synchronous HTTP requests, and that means that every time we pass the boundary between JavaScript and Java, we are doing an HTTP request, and that's kind of slow.
Hey, don't go around it, just tell how slow.
The thing I tested it with back then was a basic Vaadin application. In dev mode, normal dev mode in Firefox, it's a couple of seconds to from blank screen to everything up and running. With that one, I think it was 2 minutes or something like that. And I also got problems with depleting the stack. So I think that was just my implementation. I was not really careful with not doing function call after function call, but still it kind of works. You can find it from GitHub, I guess. So
there you have debugging.
So that's actually something we could do about this. If the speed down is only because of all the HTTP requests, we could actually write a Chrome extension that just has a WebSocket to the dev mode server and actually does the communication. So it doesn't need to be synchronous at this point. It just has to be the transport mechanism for the actual synchronous calls that block it off. So you do a local sync XHR, which is way faster, and then let the WebSocket actually do the communication. That socket is stable. That can speed things up.
The IE8 doesn't have WebSockets.
Yeah, you could join a Flash plugin for this actually.
Let me just mention specifically what I was talking about earlier is that we already have this thing called the JS Stack Emulator.
We don't actually need it for IE8. It still works in IE8.
That's true, demo still works. But just to give you an example of how, even if you don't have source map support in your browser, you can actually make it work. The JS Stack Emulator that's used in JUnit test essentially maintains source map information inside the JavaScript code itself. What it does is basically it wraps every single expression in your code and constantly says, I am here, I am here, I am here. I'm from this line of Java code here. And it maintains these global variables so that constantly as the browser is executing, it knows where it is in the original Java code. So it actually would be possible to build it actually would be possible to build an Eclipse debugger interface that if it could, talk to the IE8 JavaScript debugger, and clearly there's a protocol there because the Microsoft Script debugger talks to it. That could just ask for those global variables whenever it was paused, and you would know where, the exact line of JavaScript code that the JavaScript was paused. So there is possibility there to do it, but I wouldn't want to put that work on Brian. I'm just saying that somebody else in the open source community, or maybe this guy right here, would actually like to build an IDE integration that uses that technique for IE8. But IE8 seems like it's going to work forever, so dev mode seems like it will work to the year 2020.
But if you do that and you are just going off of the stack information like that, you still do have to figure out what the type of that object is, because it could be a subclass.
Yeah, we could change the grid compiler to just put reflection data in there for that, but yeah.
So as you see Mike is sad again, please do something about it. Thank you.
Hello guys. Thank you very much for your work and organizing this conference. So now the GWT project is open source and it's good for the continuity, but you said something, Daniel, that scares me a little bit. Google is a black box for me. I don't know how it works. Is there in a very distant future, could there be any reason why Google could discontinue the support to the GWT project?
So the thing with Google is we don't actually plan, we just do. So nobody knows if Larry decides that it's way better to, I don't know, build a giant laser.
A killed Reader, I think that's
exactly. So you could imagine that every product, so we killed Google Reader, and lots of people were actually unhappy about this. And lots of Googlers were unhappy about this as well. So we will never make a statement like, we're gonna do GWT in 5 years. But if GWT is successful within Google, and if it's a good way to write software, this is why we need to innovate. Googlers will use it, and this is will fund our team because we need it. This is how simple it is. If we get to a point where people look at GWT and say, well, you cannot write good software with GWT because it had this and that and this problem, we don't fix it, then we end up in a bad place. So I would say, as long as we have this big community internally at Googlers, and we have a big open source community actually using it, we are fine.
Yeah, I would also add a couple of things. One is as you see Google, obviously we can't comment on internal stuff too much or unannounced stuff, but as you see more products being released in the open, like the new spreadsheets and Google Shopping Express and Google Flights and hotels and those kind of things, that's an indication to you that not only there are existing products that are still using GWT, like AdWords, AdSense, DoubleClick, the things that actually make the $10 billion a quarter that we actually funds everything else. But as long as those projects are still using GWT, but also you see new stuff doing it, then you're seeing that there are actually internal customers that are placing a demand that pays the paychecks of the GWT team members. But I also like to actually kind of go back on that question, because I think if tomorrow Oracle were to fold up and say, you know what, we're not putting any money into Java anymore, would that mean that Java's dead? Would you guys stop using it? Because Java's an open source project, and I think it's bigger than just Oracle now. Or if Guido Van Rossum said tomorrow, I've had it with Python, screw it. Would people stop using Python? Or if Matt stopped writing Ruby? nobody cares about the fact that their corporate sponsors are Ruby and Python, basically, maybe roll up, go over and play dead. So the way to think about it is that the whole reason for doing the GWT steering committee in the first place was to stop Google as the sole gatekeeper of GWT, so that, if sometime in the future, 5 years from now, Google did decide not to contribute to it anymore, there would be a rich community of people. There'd be a Sencha, and there'd be a Vaadin, and there'd be an ArcBees, and there'd be people like Julien who were still actually adding new stuff and fixing stuff and contributing to it. And if we get a critical mass of those people, including people in this room today, then it's never going to go away. As long as you guys continue to use it, continue to contribute to it, it's still going to exist. And you see that with most open source projects. It's like jQuery was maintained by one guy, John Resig, for a long time. If John Resig basically keeled over and died tomorrow, and I hope he doesn't, but if he did, people would still be using jQuery because they don't care about whoever guy off somewhere is the official sponsor of the thing. So the real answer to it is that Google is an important contributor, really important contributor to GWT, but ultimately we should get to a point where we are not so important to it that if we no longer support it, that no one else is working on it. I think that's the real answer.
Let me rephrase this first.
One number on this, actually.
Yeah, let me rephrase this first. So it might be that Larry might have power to kill Reader. He doesn't have power to kill GWT, if you think about it.
Yeah, that's actually true. So we're actually getting to a much better place. In 2012, we had 5% open source contributions to GWT. So 95% of the work was done by Googlers. This year, so far, since we actually started the open source progress with Google I/O 2013, we actually had 20% from 22 non-Googlers on contributions. So there are 22 people out there already contributing. And we're looking to get more people involved. So we're hoping to actually that our contributions are just 20% on the project. And that's kind of reasonable, but that will take time. This is not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen over the next coming years. And you won't have to ask the question, what is Google doing in terms of what? It's just, we are so big, we have such a great community that it just works.
Yeah, I think one more thing is just to give you a little bit of a reassurance. I said this in the keynote. There are several thousand internal Googlers as of last month who had actively committed some code to our massive encode repository that were using GWT in some way. That's several thousand customers, which eclipses the number of people at this conference easily. And so there is active usage of it, and so it's not going to go away anytime soon just from inertia. GWT is essentially like i8, basically, in that sense. Yeah, maybe it shouldn't be like that. But
that's fundamental limits.
It's basically like the latest version of Chrome.
Yeah, it's like the latest version of Chrome. But it's used by enough people that there's enough inertia that it can't really be killed.
But are compiler and dev mode open source?
Yes, everything we do here is open source.
There's nothing in GWT that is not open source that I'm aware of. It's totally open source.
There's some libraries, like we have special linkers for Google services. We don't open source them. They're like the GWT protobufs library. We have them internally, but we don't open source them. That's not because we don't like to open source them, it's just someone has to do the work, basically. And then there are a couple of things, like let's say how Google Spreadsheet works internally. There's a couple of knowledge in that application that we don't want to share, because that's like our advantage, being better than any cloud service that does spreadsheets in the cloud. But let's say GWT as a tool, there's no specific knowledge that we don't want to share. We want to share as broadly as possible because that just makes the tool cheaper for us in terms of usage. The more people actually like it outside, like using it outside as well.
If you go to gwt.googlesource.com, there's a whole bunch of projects there. I think it's at least a dozen now, including the GWT plugin for each of the different platforms, i.e. Firefox, Chrome, and you can contribute patches there. The GWT site itself.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it. I would very much. It would be very good if someone besides me learned how to build the plugins and work on Firefox. So two people. Right.
Yeah, just to say.
Yeah, Colin is now in charge of Firefox.
If you want to get involved, if you want to do something exciting to GWT and get high visibility within the community, just just reach out to us and ask us. We are very friendly and very helpful, so don't hesitate there.
I need to publish more instructions, but yeah, if some people are stepping up and are really interested, then there'll be some more incentive for me to like try to open things up a little bit. Hey, we have actually a memory league patch. We'd like to get some more people to test. So.
Okay, go ahead.
So, guys, thank you for the presentations. They were great. For some time, I was trying to produce a pluggable web app, actually a pluggable application that works on GWT, and on the runtime to get something from the runtime and to, let's say, to fit extension point and to display some plugin, but it is something that currently I cannot do because all this stuff I want to be built later on, not during the build of the core application. Yeah, and it's stuff like sharing the event bus and so on.
Yeah, so you basically want a separate compilation model. I get asked this every year, like for example, someone's building a dashboard, kind of like with portlets, and they've got like, various things that they can plug in, like, a stock market watcher and some other things. And basically, those things need to communicate, and right now the way Gwt works is they each would have to be a separate Gwt application. They'd all have separate copies of like the JavaScript collections and the widget libraries and all those things in them. And so you'd have a lot of extra code in the page to support them. And so yes, up until now there really hasn't been a good way of doing it because you'd have to basically compile them all together and use code splitting. I think I talked about this in another presentation, but the Clojure compiler team has actually done work on this. They have this, I think they have this thing called the JavaScript linker or something. It works like a C linker for C code where you compile multiple things. But the idea is you compile separate applications, but when you rename and obfuscate the methods, you rename them in a stable way so that the next time you compile it, they all get the same names. And so if the shortened names basically are always given the same name, then the other things that are compiled can refer to them safely because they're not going to change. And so it's a combination of having something like that as well as having something like JS interface with @JS export, where you can say these following functions or this interface is the thing that I want to export so that other things on the same page can consume them. And so we don't have anything to announce now, we don't have anything to talk about now, but it is something that I've been asked many times before, and with the new Gwt 3.0 interrupt stuff, it could be a possibility. In other words, it could be the case that you have an interface that you mark as exportable, and we tie that into something called a stable renaming map, which is what the Clojure compiler can do. And so then when you compile another module that consumes that exported interface, you feed it that stable map that came from the other one. And then when it goes to refer to that interface, it tries to call a method on it, it will know what the name was given to when it obfuscated that method and renamed it. And so then it will properly link to it. That's something we'll potentially look at, but right now there's no way to do it, and so the only recommended workaround is to kind of use some kind of loose coupling, like host the things in iframes with post messages or some kind of other message bus type thing. But that's pretty much the only thing you can do right now.
Okay, so we are still having a couple of minutes, so let's wrap up this panel in a way that I would like to go through all of you in a such way that what would be the thing that you could add to the GUID, or we should be adding to GUID in a such way that in the end of 2014 it would kind of get the attention for all of the web community, not just Java developers, not just GUID developers, something that would be so awesome that even the JavaScript guys would be starting to learn Java. So let's start from Julien. And this is the easiest spot because you have all the options. The guys at the other end, they can't give the same answer.
refresh your application and see directly what we modify in your code. I think the guys from working with JavaScript like that. You modify your code, you refresh your application, you see the change. It's the Git application could do that. Maybe some JavaScript developer will come here. No.
I was going to say something like that. I have one better.
Well, since you didn't talk about GSS, I will say GSS. Well, it's not ready yet. Okay, so CSS tree templating, really something that is more, that a user, a regular JavaScript developer, someone that does CSS integration and things like that could really use. Even though you can do it with UI Binder and things like that, they're still not comfortable right from the beginning, and they still have to learn some little things through the process. And this is something for some of my developers from the guys from our team that they are always complaining about when they first start to work with Git, and they come from the JavaScript world.
Reintroduction of IE6 support.
So, I'm thinking realistically for 2014, a really good support for web components in Git that is landed and ready to use. I think that's going to be a really good thing for actually getting people's attention and actually turning it the other way around. If we have the JS interrupt stuff going, actually being able to properly export Java code for JavaScript developers. So it doesn't really make any difference if you're working in JavaScript or if you're working in Git. The both worlds just work together seamlessly. And that would actually mean that they can leverage like a lot of really good Java frameworks. Let's say if we want to do, I don't know, encryption in the browser. You don't actually need to rewrite that in JavaScript. You can just use the Java library that does that. And that's might be a good reason to actually get people over to switch.
I'm going to go and try to go way off on the deep end, in the blue sky, and mention something that's pretty much a moonshot, which means it's probably not going to happen, but it would be awesome if it did. He kind of mentioned something that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is if you have something like super dev mode. Today, super dev mode basically recompiles your entire app and sends down a draft mode compile of the entire app. It's a big, massive JavaScript, like 40, 50 megs or whatever for a very large application. With the new incremental compile stuff that John and Roberto are working on, the Git compiler will change into, it will only recompile the module that's changed. So if you change some code in one Git module, but you've depended on 10 others, it will only recompile that particular module. At some point, it might be possible actually to get it so that it will only recompile a class that's changed. So if you edit foo.java, the superdev mode could fire up the compiler and only recompile that one class so you get back a snippet of methods. And if you knew what the previous version of that class looked like, you could actually compute a diff, which is which methods were actually changed. Let's say only one or two of the methods were changed. Then what you could do is you could actually round-trip develop without even refreshing the browser. You could actually do a JSON request and send down those two changed methods and patch the prototype of the class that's already in the application live and modify it in place, in which case immediately the application, without even refreshing the screen, would change. And so that would be a new kind of development mode where you hit save in the browser and then you go look at it in the page and you don't hit reload at all. And so that would be, I think, something that even JavaScript programmers would like to have.
I'm actually getting excited about this.
JS Rebel ++.
I think if someone actually builds this, he would have a really great product there.
Where's James? James downstairs.
Yes.
So aside from other ideas that have come along already on the way, more hints from the compiler about what we're doing that's not as good that we could be doing. Sort of trying to figure out, okay, we're doing too many for eaches in this area, let's stop doing for eaches, switch to the for int, or things you're doing to the DOM that we can statically figure out from the compiler that this is a terrible idea, stop doing it. I know we're getting some new features in this in Chrome. The more we can map this back to original code, the better off that could be. Just playing in that area.
From my basics take on is people tend to be tend to like their existing environments. I mean, I guess I would say that like it's asking JavaScript programmers to change to Java is sort of like saying, okay, well, you know, even though you've been using VI, now you should switch to Emacs or vice versa. It's one of those things that we generally don't ask people to do. So I
like company.
So yeah, I would generally be more in favor of the interop, so that you know, people who like Java and JavaScript and can work together and swap code and all that. I think that's a better approach.
Okay, thank you guys. Let's thank the winner. So, I think it has been an awesome conference, and I have one statistic to share with you. So, all of you did vote, and we got quite a few votes. I don't know exact number, but last time I checked, it was like 2,500 something. And guess what was the kind of average of those votes? From 1 to 5. From 1 to 5, what did you get?
2.
So it was 3.97 something, so practically 4 out of 5 as an average for the presentation. I think this is totally awesome. So please give applause for all the speakers. It was awesome. So thank you for coming, and I hope you have really good ideas what we could do next year. We are definitely going to be doing this next year as well. So go to bit.ly/create 2014 and send your ideas so that we can make like 4.5 or something like that next year. Thank you.